Welcome to Chatsunami. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Chatsunami. My name's Satsunami and joining me atop the lookout tower is none other than the one and only Jess from Opinionated Lushes. Jess, welcome to Chatsunami.
Hi, thanks so much for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this episode has been a good couple of months in the making, hasn't it?
Yeah, I actually replayed this game in the meantime that we're going to be talking about, so it's all fresh.
Yeah. It's always the best though when you do get time, because it's like sometimes you get episodes where you're like, okay, let's do the recording tomorrow, and then others where you're like, I need to replay that or rewatch something, don't you?
Yeah, I forgot so many parts in this game that I'm glad I replayed it because there was just so many things that I missed, I guess.
I mean, especially with indie games, yeah, there's just so much that you're walking through it and then someone brings it up. Like, before we talk about what we are actually going to be discussing today, have you ever had that when you're playing a game and you look back at the comments that people have left online and they're like, oh, I love that bit where you go into the room and you get the Easter egg?
Yes, every time. I miss things all the time. And I never realized until I finished the game and then I look at the achievements list. And I'm like, how did I only do 9 achievements? I played 20 hours. What are you talking about? How did I spend so much time and only get 9 of 50 achievements? Like, that's ridiculous. And then you have to replay it because I can't leave things unfinished. 100%.
Oh no, absolutely. It's like you do look at that list, I know exactly the feeling. It's all like greyed out and
Yep.
you're just looking at it like, this is disgraceful. I need those achievements filled up.
And I call myself a gamer.
The Xbox just rushing you back, going, yep, go back. Or Steam or whatever, just like, go on, go back. But of course, today we are indeed going to be talking about the indie game Firewatch, which, I'm going to be honest, I didn't realise this came out in 2016. For anybody who's been listening for a while, they'll know that I am absolutely terrible, see, when it comes to playing popular games like this. Honestly, I say, oh, that looks like such a good game. Let me put it on the backlog and just leave it there. And then I'll come back years later and play it. There's so many games. Like, have you done that before?
Yeah, so I used to watch a lot of video game YouTubers, especially about around 2015, 2016, and whenever I watch them start a game that I'm like, I want to play this, I'd pause the video and then go buy it, and Firewatch was one of those. A YouTuber was playing it. I saw the opening, I was like, that's beautiful. Pause, went, bought it, and then I just played it right away, like right when it came out. Like I said, I'm glad I replayed it, but that happens to me all the time. I will see a game and I'm like, I'm gonna play this. I add it to my wish list. Now my wish list on Steam is like 2,000 plus. And then if I get it, I get it. And then it adds to my list of games that I'm gonna play, but still haven't played because I'm too busy replaying games and playing my favorite games. So I have like 600 games on my Steam account, and there's probably a good 200 plus that I haven't actually touched yet. It's so bad. And like some of them I bought when they came out. I just haven't gotten to them.
It's terrible when that happens though, because the reason that I got into Firewatch, and this is going to be like a really weird tumbling down the rabbit hole kind of thing here, but I remember I had bought years ago, I think it was around 2013, 2014, I learned about the Humble Bundles. Because I was a student at the time, I was like, oh, I have to have all these games for really cheap. So I had like this FOMO of missing out, so I was buying like all these games, and one of the games that I bought was like an RPG Maker bundle, and one of the games that came with that was To the Moon, which technically I only played it last year, and it's became one of my favourite games of all time. But then that set me down a path of going to other indie games and things, so like What Remains of Edith Finch.
Oh, I loved that game. That was so
It's
good.
so good, isn't it? Yeah. My friend has been saying that for ages. Oh, you should play that game. And I was like, yeah, I'll get to it. And then, of course, I saw it on Game Pass. And I'm like, oh, right, okay, I'll try it. And yeah, not going to lie, there wasn't a dry eye in the house by the end of it. I was just like, brilliant game.
I've always been a fan of indie games, more so than even like AAA popular games. And when I started gaming, I didn't really have a lot of money. So like when AAA games came out and where they were like $80 plus, I couldn't afford that, but I could get an indie game for less than $10. So I would just started playing all these indie games that I find have like so much better storytelling than a lot of AAA games. The graphics tend to be more artistic versus a lot of AAA games that try to, I guess, do more realism and that kind of stuff, to the point where like some of my tattoos are actually like indie games. I'm really big into horror point and clicks, so a lot of point and click horror games I have like tattooed on me just because they were like such great games. How can I not? They're amazing characters. So indie games are always where it's at for me.
I honestly feel as if the older I'm getting, and I say the older I'm getting, I'm about, I've just reached the big 3-0 last year, so I'm like, I'm yelling at kids to get off my lawn. I'm saying the youth of today, they have no idea.
No idea.
Yeah, back in my day, we had to blow into the cartridge and put it into the N64. I used to be really big into things like Pokemon and Sonic and things. And don't get me wrong, I still am, still have a soft spot for those kind of games. But the older I get, I feel as if I'm not really getting into big, expansive games that take days to finish, like Red Dead Redemption 2 or these kind of big games. Because I brought that up because I streamed that, I remember, I think last year, the year before, on Twitch. And I remember playing it and I wasn't having fun with it. That way where it's like, it's objectively a good game and everything. It looks great. The story's good. But I was just like, I'm not enjoying this. But then I go to a game like To the Moon, which again, that had me weeping in a corner.
Yeah.
Or you've got What Remains of Edith Finch, another beautiful game. Even games like Coffee Talk, have you played that one?
Oh yeah, I loved Coffee Talk. It was so good.
It really is. Like, I was so surprised at how much I enjoyed that, because literally the premise of the game is you make coffee and you listen to people's problems. But, the more I was playing it, the more I was like, oh, tell me more, please. Tell me more about your drama.
Text-based games, I feel like where the gameplay is mostly just like reading and answering and it's just text, there's not like crazy graphics. A lot of those games I find have really deep storytelling because that's what the sale point is. Like, I've played a few and I remember starting them and being like, I don't know, maybe this will be boring. But then, yeah, it draws you in because you get to know these characters on like a deeper level than, say, some games where it's all about the action.
It's true, because you do get these games that nowadays, when they're in the AAA bracket, they want to be a lot more, over the top, bombastic. I always remember, especially for Call of Duty, there was somehow an emphasis on saying, oh, we got this writer from this very famous movie and everything. He's going to be writing the story. And of course, maybe Call of Duty's like fandom isn't the best place for these like epic storylines and everything. And it's a shame that's the way it went. But you're totally right. For these indie games, there's definitely an emphasis on storytelling. And especially going back to what we're talking about today with Firewatch, I have to admit, I've been wanting to play this game for absolutely ages. And I remember downloading it and I was like, okay, I'll play it eventually. And it sat there for ages. I didn't touch it at all. And then I got a notification saying, look at all these games coming onto Game Pass. And I'm like, oh, cool, this and that. And it's like, and here's the games that are leaving Game Pass. And I saw Firewatch pop up and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to play this game as soon as possible. So I will admit, I did race through it quite a bit. I was like, I'm going to play it before they take it away from me for free. That's kind of how I got into it, I have to admit. I went through this phase of going through, I still am going through the phase, who am I kidding? But I went through this phase of going through indie games and things, and especially these quote-unquote walking simulators. But I'm quite curious, before we talk about the game itself, how did you get into Firewatch?
So I really got into watching, have you heard of, Markiplier?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
that small indie creator, yeah.
Markiplier literally just, well, I don't know.
Sorry,
I don't know.
I'm joking.
We're
Sorry.
oceans away. I don't know what your media consumption is,
That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Actually, I started watching him because my son was watching him, and he spends time playing a lot of indie games, particularly indie horror games. And so I kind of got into there, and then I started on Steam, and I'm a sucker for a Steam sale. So if I see something 90% off and its reviews are mostly positive, I'm probably just gonna buy it because I might want to play it one day. And so I saw a little brief glimpse of like Firewatch game through. I love beautiful landscapes. I love games that spend time on those landscapes, make them look like a painting. There's another game called Lake. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
It's, again, simple gameplay. You're a mail delivery driver. Like, that's in a small town. You just get to drive around, but the landscape's beautiful. And like, that just intrigues me and gets me in. And once I'm in, then I'm like playing it and trying to finish it. But it gets me in, just the beautiful artwork and the amazing voice acting too. Like, it starts, and you're just like, wow, this is believable.
I mean, that's how they hook you in, to be fair.
Yeah, well, it just feels personal. It feels like you're catching a glimpse into someone's like life.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and so those kind of games really, I mean, that strike an emotional chord, which I feel like a lot of walking simulators do. It just, it's like watching a really emotional movie that you're also controlling. It's an experience.
Because, I mean, going back to something you were saying before, it's like the emphasis on these indie games, and especially in terms of like walking simulators and things like that, is the interpersonal relationships between the characters themselves and the story, and trying to make it as relatable as possible. Because you can't have, well, sometimes you can, but 9 times out of 10, you can't really have like a massive, bombastic, action-filled story on such a limited budget or a limited team and things like that. And I feel as if that's where they have the advantage. And I know that sounds like such a first world problem, be like, oh no, AAA studios have too much money, oh no. But it does feel like that though sometimes. It's like, because they've got all that backing and everything, they usually try to make it as big and bold as possible, whereas these games have to work in their, within their means.
Yeah, well, I feel like if you have to work within like a confinement, then you try to be as creative as you can while in those rules. But if you have all the resources, I feel like it's really hard to like find a place to go, because you can literally do anything. Sometimes those rules help you limit what's going to happen, and then you get to focus on what actually matters instead of, other things.
Oh no, totally. But see, without any further ado, will we just jump into why Firewatch is by far one of the, I would say, like, the games of the year that you should be playing, but this game came out in 2016. I feel as if people should have played it by now.
But it still holds up, I feel like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
If you're like me and you haven't played this game yet, please go away and play it before we jump in, because, yeah, we will probably be diving into spoilers. Yeah, exactly. Because I always forget, it's like, just as I'm about to talk about the plot and the main part of the episodes, I'm like, oh yeah, and when so-and-so, and then I stop myself and I go, oh, wait, spoilers. So yeah, this is your spoiler warning for this. So yeah, go away and play it or watch a walkthrough. Go away and do that. I don't mean go away.
We don't want you here. Play it first.
Like, that's the first thing they say in the podcast business school, I'm sure. First of all, say to your audience, go away. Yeah,
go away.
That's what they want to hear. But on that note, we will go and, make sure there's no fires around us, and we will be right back after these messages. Welcome to Chatsunami, a variety podcast that discusses topics from gaming and films to anime and general interests.
Previously on Chatsunami, we've analysed what makes a good horror game, conducted a retrospective on Pierce Brosnan's run as James Bond, and listened to us take deep dives into both the Sonic and Halo franchises.
Also, if you're an anime fan, then don't forget to check us out on our sub-series Chatsunami, where we dive into the world of anime. So far, we've reviewed things like Death Note, Princess Mononoke, and the hit Beyblade series.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, and all good podcast apps.
As always, stay safe,
stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated.
I'm here to get drunk.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I have about half a cup of vodka.
Drink.
Wait, are we live? Hi, I'm Jessica.
One professional skill that I would really like to learn is stripping.
I'm Sonia.
Because, I'm okay with not being artistic. I'm just that's cool.
And I'm Dawn Marie.
And we are Opinionated Lushes. I'll make a tomato vodka soup.
Ooh.
Also known as a Caesar.
Once a week, we get together to drink and talk shit. We start our episodes off with a question and a drink word. We usually never stay on topic or wait for the drink word to start drinking.
You're already breaking the game.
There's a new episode of Opinionated Lushes every Friday on all streaming platforms.
Just testing mattresses. Why isn't that a job?
It probably is.
An unedited episode Saturday on YouTube.
You just want to tell people you love them?
Yeah, sometimes you need it.
It just sounds dangerous.
Have a cocktail suggestion?
A topic of interest.
A good drinking word?
Feel free to DM us on Instagram or email us at opinionatedlushes@gmail.com. If I don't know you, I will.
So go ahead, grab a drink, any kind of drink, and get ready to laugh with us and share our drunken opinions.
This episode is sponsored by Zencastr. If you're a podcaster that records remotely like me, then you'll know how challenging it can be to create the podcast you've always wanted. That's where Zencastr comes in. Before I met Zencastr, I was but a naive podcaster, recording on low quality, one-track audio waves. But with Zencastr, you can kiss those fears goodbye as they provide crystal clear audio and HD video. Plus, with our all-in-one podcasting suite, recording with guests is extremely simple. From local recordings to post-production, Zencastr has it all. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code Chatsunami. You'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experience I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. So let's discuss Firewatch, because as I said, this has definitely been an episode that you and I have been itching to record for.
Yes, for a while, yeah.
So do you want to give the listeners at home a brief overview about what this game's actually about?
Okay, so you play as Henry. His wife ended up developing early onset dementia. So while it kind of starts with text dialogue, which I thought was awesome, before you get to the forest, I thought that was so smart. But anyways, your wife is sick. She goes to stay with her parents. You decide, I need to get away. I'm going to take this Firewatch job. And now you're in the woods watching fires, talking to your boss, who's in a different tower, Delilah. And there's a mystery component involving missing hikers and a strange figure. And you're trying to solve that while also, walking around a beautiful landscape and forest. That's pretty like the bare bones of what that. There's a lot going on there. It's like 90 days or something. It jumps, but there's a lot going on there. But that's the basic premise of Firewatch, I think.
No, it's a great summary for sure, because you're completely right. There is just so much going on in this game. You've got, as you said, the mystery components, the missing hikers, you've got quite a creepy undertone at some points. But just jumping back to something you were saying earlier when you were talking about how it begins with text dialogue and everything and you have to choose your options, that, I have to admit, took me by surprise when I first played this, because I thought maybe the rest of the game was going to be like this. You just had to choose your options or something, like a Commodore 64 game or something. I was like, where do you want to go? YN? You're like, what the hell? But no, I have to admit, I got quite emotional at some bits, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. This game is just text so far. It's not even, there wasn't any major visuals or anything that flash up on the screen. It's literally just text. And it's just so heartbreaking, because in that couple of text prompts that you just get this whole overview about this poor guy called Henry, and of course his wife, who, as you pointed out, is developing early onset dementia. And I have to admit, my heart sank. See, when I was reading that she was getting confused at her work, she was getting a lot more agitated and she couldn't speak, and I was just like, oh my god, no. Obviously a horrible thing to go through and everything. And when you start to see what Henry's seeing and everything, you're like, oh no. And just the kind of downward spiral, because minus the death, of course, it's almost like a text-based version of Up, when it starts off, really cheery, and oh look, it's a happy couple, they get a dog together, and then it just spirals and you're like, oh sweet Jesus, no.
And some of the choices that they offer end up being like two hard choices. Like neither choice is a good choice, but you have to make those choices. And I felt like that was what was emotional for me. It was like the idea of, do you just keep taking care of her even though the care might not be adequate? You have to go to work, you have to, or do you put her in a home? And that's a hard thing to, like, especially when your wife is so young. You expect to live into your 80s and then deal with those questions, not married for a couple years.
It is definitely a more realistic take, I would say. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not a game that offers a good option, bad option like most games do. Yeah. And I feel as if, going back to what we were saying about indie games, it's kind of a strength of them where they can say, oh, you thought you were getting a happy game with Firewatch. Oh boy. It's like, oh no, you get back. Get your happiness and optimism out of here. We're starting strong.
How did you feel about Henry eventually just like leaving and going to Firewatch for months? knowing his wife was away at her parents and he chose not to go with her. How did that make you feel?
On the surface level, it's definitely a horrible thing to do, but at the same time, it felt like a very human reaction.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like he was saying, oh, I'm going to try the best that I can, because obviously the family step in, and as far as I remember, I think he gets does he not get a DUI or something coming back and he gets arrested?
Yeah, he goes through a hard time. Yeah, something like that.
And then that's when the family find out and they take over and, you know, they force him out of, you know, looking after her and everything. And there's obviously that sense of, I suppose, maybe inadequacy from Henry's part. Like, he wants to be a good partner. But I mean, especially with something like dementia, that is such a hard thing for someone to take care of on their own. It's like, it's not something they can go out, he can work, and then he can come back.
Especially in America. I hate to say that, but like, that's where this is set. It's not the best place to have to take care of a sick loved one. So
no, totally, you're right. I mean, coming from someone who lives in Scotland, totally agree. I would say that it seems like a very human reaction, because obviously you've got that term of fight or flight, and I know it's kind of like a weird way to use it in this sense. Is he going to stay and fight for his wife? Is he going to, you know, stand up to her family and, you know, kind of step up a bit? Or is he going to go away for months on end to this place? And I feel as if, in a way, if you look above the kind of surface level of it, definitely he probably needed that time away to clear his head and to kind of have that retrospective time to himself, because we've all been through hard times. Maybe not as bad as that, but at the same time, we've all been through hard times where you do just want to run away. You do just want to leave everything behind. No pun intended by saying to burn everything behind and, you know, start anew, but you want to get a fresh start in things. And at the same time, obviously, he's still married to her and he clearly still loves her, but there is that caveat of the fact that she is ill, she's being looked after her family, and he doesn't feel as if he's good enough. And I do feel it's very human. I know I keep using that like a buzzword, like slap it on the box. This is a human game, Satsunami. What did you think, though?
Well, okay, so I have a sociology degree, so I studied a lot of like human trends, and I hate to say this, but statistically speaking, husbands do leave their sick wives at way greater rates than wives leave their sick husbands. And I couldn't help but, even though I'm playing Henry, just as a woman, I imagine Julia's, you know, I get she's like forgetting things and stuff like that, but have you ever like worked or seen people with dementia?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they're not always forgetting. Even when they're the worst, every once in a while they remember, and I just could not take the heartbreak of imagining her during those brief moments of remembering and knowing Henry's not there. So like for me, obviously I'm like, I get it. It's a hard choice to have to make, but he couldn't have waited like one more year. Firewatching would always be there, you know? And so like for me, even though I'm playing this character, I was already weary of him and his motives. Just like, I mean, especially as we get into this game and we start talking about Delilah, you know, it just felt like it was so, I guess like it wasn't easy for him, but at some points it kind of felt he was also forgetting in like his own way. Julia had dementia, but he was forgetting in his own way. So I had a little knee-jerk reaction, my own human reaction to his human reaction, I guess you could say.
I have to admit, you do look at it and objectively, you can't really spin it. Objectively, it is wrong that he did go away and everything, but it is like the sense of when you factor in that element of how obviously he's feeling with the whole situation. Again, I'm not saying it's right at all. It's not at all, but it does seem as if that's where that came from. And you're right, it is horrible that Julia could have woken up and got that glimpse of, oh, where's Henry?
Yeah.
And then just went back to that state of dementia. It's such a horrible thing. It's such a poignant way as well, though, to start a game, I have to say. It's not something you usually see, and it's not something I'm obviously demanding of games to start doing, you know? I don't want to be booting up, I don't know, just anything, you know, like a platformer or something, and it's like, your character's got an illness. It's like, oh no. It's like, oh no. Can we not go back to the days where it was just like running
Sometimes
fast?
we just want fun, you know? We don't want to think of our problems. That's the point.
You'll take your grit and you'll like it. It's like, oh no.
Oh
Please. But it is like such an impactful way, because it's certainly, would you say it's an intro that you're not really going to forget?
Yeah, like you just right emotionally. It's like then you enter, I like to call it almost like a Wizard of Oz moment. You know, it's the black and white text opening that you still are feeling like these emotions. Oh no, something terrible is going to happen. But then it's like you wake up and everything's beautiful. And it's almost like, okay, now I'm skeptical. Like now everything's going to like catch me off guard because that was so heavy and now we're into the game and it's so pretty and you just always feel like there's something else about to happen when you start with such a high point, I guess. Most games build up. This just like punched you in the face. Made you cry, you know?
If I could describe it very flippantly, I would definitely say this game's probably, at least the intro, is the equivalent of, you know, that old joke of, anyway, here's Wonderwall? So it's like they start off with this very emotional, impactful story, and then they put you in like the middle of this beautiful scenery, and they're like, anyway, here's beautiful scenery. Yep. When you go explore, it's beautiful. And I'm like, but what about Julia? What about you know, you're like, you can't just do that. You can't just punch me in the face, game, and then say, oh, sorry, here's pretty colours. I'm like, what is wrong with you? You emotionally mugged me.
I know, and now it's like, now you have all this backstory and nowhere to put it right away. Like, you're like, okay, now I'm learning a job, I guess. Time to go walk up my tower. You know, it was just so much that, especially first time playing it, you don't expect it.
But do you think that's why Henry moves so slow in the game? Because he is carrying that emotional baggage everywhere.
Actually, it's more if you look for your first person and you look down, he has little stubby legs.
Yeah.
Like just little legs. That used to be my favorite part, and it does take you out, so don't, like, a little bit of the emotional aspect, so don't do this if you're playing it and you want to feel emotions. But if you look down and run, his little feet just move really, really fast, but, like, they don't bend at the knee, and they're really short. He has really big hands and big fingers and little legs, so...
You do see pictures of him throughout the game. You don't really see the model itself, right?
Yeah.
But can I just say how inspiring it is that they did get like a dad bod character in, you know, kind of short, beardy guy. You know, he's not your stereotypical, oh, look, he's got the chiseled jaw, Giga Chad kind of thing.
No, it's like he's been camping and that's about it. Like, you know, like he knew how to do things. But I loved how they did whenever he was like climbing or something, you always heard like, I was like, that's realistic. I'm glad they put that in there because you would always like be out of breath.
I gave like a little clap when I was playing. I was like, well done, game. Well done. Realism. And that's the realism we want in these games. It's like, oh my god, I relate with this character.
Yeah. There was so many details in this game. You know, even though you don't see people characters besides like pictures, that it was still so easy to like believe. Yeah. So like, I mean, there's so many items and objects that you can just pick up to look at, you know, like just so much detail to everything.
I have to admit, that was something I was quite confused at initially. There's a scene at the very beginning, as you know, where you have to investigate who's setting off fireworks, and then it turns out it's like these two teenage girls who are just, you know, being menaces to society, let's face it. But of course, you see them in the distance and they're like, oh my god, you're being a bit, you know, and all of this rubbish, and they're just antagonising Henry, but obviously they're just silhouettes. But then later on, the only other silhouette you see is and we'll get onto it later, but of course, one of the main antagonists of the game, and they're just known as like unknown silhouette or something like that, or unknown figure. Yeah. And that creeped me out something awful, because I was like, oh, this is going to be, you know, like I've already had the emotional gut punch, you know, before. So that's why I'm limping back to the tower, like, oh, this emotional baggage, And then I get out of this cave, and all of a sudden there's just this like heavy breathing guy looking over the hill, just like, oh. And I'm like, are you a ghost? Are you a spy? Like, what's going on here?
The mystery starts, and like you have no idea. Yeah, like that's it. At first, I did think it was haunted. I thought it was going to be some sort of like haunted thing happen or spiritual or supernatural or something, because you don't get any context of who this figure is. He's just there and he's watching you. And I feel like being in the middle of the woods where we know Henry had to hike 2 days to get to, where he is not readily, like, there's no help anywhere that he can get within any length of time that would actually be helpful. And now there's this man watching him. Like, that's terrifying. That's just terrifying because you don't know the figure's motives or anything. He could come into your tower and then what? What do you do? Like, that's it, you know?
I'm going to be honest, when I started this game, I had no idea this was actually a volunteering job. It makes sense, you know, I know there's like park rangers and everything, and there's, you know, references to other rangers and things like that in the game, but I genuinely had no idea this was a thing in America, which obviously does make sense.
We have them in Canada too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I used to work as a doula. We're like birth cheerleaders. Like, we just go, you got this, you go, girl, you know? And then, well, one of the doulas, she was a doula 6 months of the year, and then a fire watcher the other 6 months of the year. So yeah, and she would just go and she'd stay in the woods for like 6 months in like Alberta or something.
That is one hell of a resume, sorry.
Yeah, and like she said she like was writing. I think she was working on a book, so it gave her time to write, you know, like that kind of thing. So I feel like if you're doing like a job like that, fire watching is perfect.
Oh no, totally. It seems as if it's like the most remote, or not the most, but one of the most remote jobs they could probably have, with great scenery and solitude, really. And I think that's kind of what adds to the creepiness of it all, because I'm not much of a hill walker. Like, don't get me wrong, I have done my fair share of walking through Scottish countrysides, you know, country paths like that. It's a completely different thing. It'll sound weird, but I always remember seeing Americans talk about their countryside's the wrong word, but you know, their rural areas and things like that, especially with this, where he's walking through the forest. It's like, oh, it's beautiful and everything, but it's so much different compared to like what it is in Scotland. I've seen this scenery before, but comparing it to that, like, I think as far as I know, I don't think we have anything like this in Scotland because it's so small. But I mean, if there is, I apologise to any, you know, the Venn diagram of Chatsunami listeners, Scottish fire watchers in between, you know. But I can't imagine, because it's so expansive, this whole area, it's not like it's like a small territory. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like the countryside and the rural areas of Scotland are small by any means, they're not. But compared to this, it's like there's so much that could be lurking in there. And if Netflix documentaries have taught me anything, it's never to go in the woods alone. So there's always that.
In America, national parks can be scary because not only are they so vast. Yellowstone National Park, where this game is set, we are just in a section of it, is over like 3,500 square miles. I don't know what that is in real terms. In America, they use miles, but it's really, really expansive. And people go missing in U.S. national parks all the time. And they don't always get reported, because if you're not someone that someone knows you're at this park and will report you, then they go missing. And that's like a real part of like being in America. So like this was almost like an added realism to that when we talk like about the people that go missing and how the boss Delilah handles that. It seems like very American and what they actually do. It's terrifying. There's so much. And there has been bear attacks in middle America. That's a thing that happens too. Like these are real things that happen, and it's ridiculous. Like when I think America, I don't think of Wyoming. So it was funny to like research this, because I did research it a little bit and like hear all this, because they're not that far away from where I am, and I've never been that close to a bear, I'll be honest.
I mean, that's the thing that's keeping me out of Canada, to be honest. Like, I get off the plane and all of a sudden I get mauled by a bear, and I'm like, damn my luck.
You're more likely to get mauled by a coyote here right now. If you're in a city, city, it'll be a coyote. So
I'll take my chances in like Edinburgh or Glasgow or something like that, where it's just like random people coming up to you. I'll be like, I think I'll take my chances with them rather than a coyote. One of my co-hosts and good friends, Andrew, who also does some of the other episodes with me, he also lives in Canada, and he's been saying for ages for me to visit, because he's like, oh, you should come over and, you know, we can do episodes together and things like that. But if he turns around to me and he says, you know what we should do while you're here? Let's go camping in Canada. I'll be like, No, my name's not Henry. No, I'm going back in that plane.
You drive on our highways and there's like moose warning signs.
Oh my god.
Like, and that's a highway. That's like, there's a lot of cars there. And they're like, watch out for the moose. Like, they'll total your car.
I mean, the closest we've got to that, we've got like warning signs for deers if you drive like further up north. But I mean, that's okay. I've seen the size of, I was going to say mooses, but then I remember people saying, oh, should it not be meeses? It's like, no, it shouldn't. Yeah, no, I've seen, well, not personally, and nor do I have any intention to go up to a moose and be like, excuse me, how tall are you? You know? That is one of my fears, where if I, God forbid, if I got attacked or you're seriously hurt by one of these animals, and then the headline misinterprets what happened as like, idiot tourist got mauled by a moose. And I'm like, no, that's not what happened. I just wanted to record a podcast.
I was just making a TikTok, guys. It wasn't my fault.
Who knew that flossing beside a moose would cause serious bodily harm? Not me.
Speaking of getting attacked by animals, did you know there's achievements in this game where you can get attacked by animals?
What?
Yes. Okay. So I have almost all the achievements. I'm missing 2. My second playthrough, I actually got the bee sting achievement, where there is a section where if you look, a bee will pop out and sting you. Just for an achievement, just for fun. But apparently there is a raccoon somewhere that will bite you, and then you get an achievement that says, it's probably not rabies. So that achievement is there. I have no idea where it is though. So if anyone has plays this game, there's a raccoon somewhere in the woods. Find him.
I'm sorry, it's just the thought of you marching through the forest like, where are you, raccoon? I need that achievement.
I literally did. And after a while I gave up because I was like, I thought I looked here. I don't have no idea. I'm assuming maybe he pops up near the outhouse on a specific day, or maybe I assume where there's trash. He's a trash panda. There has to be trash somewhere. So I was trying to follow the trash, but then I also kept cleaning it up because that was a nice little. Did you clean up the beer bottles and stuff?
Oh,
whenever
yeah.
You saw them?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I always got to play the good guy in video games, so I was making sure to keep that park clean.
No, I definitely did that as well. It's a bit like, you know, when you play games like GTA, and it's like, oh, it's boring causing carnage. Let's pretend that we're driving like a sane person. And, you drive, like, you follow the traffic lights and everything.
Yeah,
and you do your turn signals, yeah. And you're like, oh my god, this is so fun.
You're like passing the cops. You're like, I'm in the lines. You can't. I'm following rules. I hold my breath for a minute. I'm like, I'm doing all the things.
No, I totally know what you mean, though. Although, granted, I did steal the radio from the teens because they were very rude. And I'm a very petty man. So I was like, yep, I'm taking this.
I threw it in the water.
Well done.
I didn't even realize I accidentally picked it up. And then they were yelling at me put that down or whatever the teens yell. And so I just dropped it and I was right near the water. And then they're like, I can't believe you ruined it. And they were yelling at me more and then they disappear. But yeah, so I that's what I did with that.
Because it's quite funny. I think if you answer your walkie-talkie to talk to Delilah while you're holding the radio, she actually goes, whoa, what's that? You're like, whoa, that's very loud music. He's like, oh, it's the teens radio and everything. You're like, okay, that's pretty. That's a nice touch. And I do have to admit, there are a lot of nice touches in this game like that. And it definitely adds to the environmental storytelling, I will say, because there's a scene later on where the next time you come across the teens is, well, they've more or less gone missing. You come across their camp and everything, and their tent's been torn up. It is as if it's a bear. And you're like, oh, Jesus, am I going to have to do a quick time event where I have to fight off a bear or something? Like, I'm not ready for this.
I thought the same thing. I thought there was going to be a bear attack, so yeah.
And of course you've got the letter from them that says, oh, there's that pervert ranger and everything. And, there's a lot of moments like that where it does set you on edge for a game that doesn't have any actual characters. And by characters, I mean models following you about, other than those 2 instances at the very beginning. Oh, it's very unsettling. And the other moment, I don't know if this made you jump as well, but the moment where you're fishing by the riverside and then you come across the radio and you get knocked out.
Yes. Oh my gosh, scared me.
I jumped out my skin because, don't get me wrong, I'm not that good when it comes to jump scares and things like that, but honest to God, when I saw that, I was like, ooh, oh, a radio. I get sucker punched. I'm like, oh.
It's because you're like walking around and very like you've already been conditioned to like look for things in this game. So it's like when you see the radio on the ground, you're like, oh, okay, I just gotta go pick it up like I did everything else. And then it tricks you. It tricks you. It's like you walked into a trap. You just fell for it. Lulled you into a false sense of security. I like when you're walking to the water where the girls are and you see their like underwear. Did you pick it up?
Yeah, and then I had to report it. I was like, because initially I was like, oh god, don't tell me this is going to be like, every horror film, I was going to specify, but let's face it, it's like every horror film with like teen protagonists where it's like, oh my god, they've gone skinny dipping. I'm like, there better not be an axe murderer in this forest. My poor heart can't take this.
I just love how it calls you out for touching it. It's like, oh yeah, you're picking that up. That's gross. I can't believe you did that. Henry keeps getting called out.
I have to admit, I do like Delilah in this game. I do like the fact that there is that kind of light-hearted banter between the two. It's not just an exposition machine, if that makes sense. She's not just there to be like, oh, someone went missing last year. She actually adds a lot to the game itself, whether it be her insight or just acting like a real person.
Well, that's what I was going to say. She's her own individual character. Even if no one's like playing her, she's her own individual character. She's doing things while you're doing things. And I feel like that is like such a nice touch because she's not just a plot device. She's having her whole own story going on. Like, the first day she talks to you and welcomes you. And then later on she apologizes because she was drunk when she was first talking to you. So she didn't mean to pry, like you didn't realize that at the time because she was doing her own thing. And I think that was a really nice touch. I personally love her as a character, hate her as a person.
Yeah, I can understand that. Because I was thinking back to the very beginning of what you were saying about the relationship between Henry and Julia and everything, and how it's bad enough that you ran away to Firewatch, but then, of course, we get some late night, I don't even know how to make this into a euphemism, but you know what I mean, what happens.
Late night walkie-talkieing, yeah.
Late night fire watching, let's say. Literally late night fire watching, because that's the first time you see the fire.
Yeah.
And you have to name. What did you call it?
I can't even remember what the choices were, to be honest.
I can only remember two. There was Fire Flapjack, Fire Delilah.
Flapjack was the one I did, because I was not
Same.
naming this fire after Delilah.
I mean, would you be insulted if someone named a fire after you? Because I think I would be. I'd be like, wow, rude.
I probably wouldn't be offended, depending on who it was. Who it was that named that fire. If it was like a friend of mine, I'd be like, oh, are you saying I'm a firecracker? Ha ha ha. Now my name's going to be in the news. But if it was like someone that didn't like me, then I'd be insulted, I think.
Yeah. I'd be like, I beg your pardon. I'll show you a fire.
I'll show you a fire, yeah.
But yeah, that's of course the kind of the turning point of the game, I suppose, where things start to go wrong, where you're looking out and you see your first fire, as it were, and it's an uncomfortable scene, I have to say, because obviously on the one hand, you can look at this as Henry feeling alone and guilty about running away and everything, and he just wants that kind of companionship with someone who isn't really in the know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just like an outsider. He just wants an outsider to confide in and get close to and everything. But on the other hand, come on, Henry, put your wedding ring back on. For God's sake.
Right?
I was very conflicted with that. I was like, oh God, Henry, you're not making it easy to like you. Are we supposed to like you?
I think it was just, like every time I just kept going, what? It's not about you, Henry. I'm so sorry, but your sick wife is not about you right now. So stop making, it just felt like he was making everything about him. And because his relationship with Delilah was just audio based, really, she could see him, but you don't really have him see her, that I think he was able to put probably all the best qualities he loved in Julia onto this almost fictional person. Because I feel like, it's almost the same with online relationships. It's like if you are only having a relationship in that one form, it's so easy to put qualities onto this person that don't actually exist. So I feel like he was just able to kind of put all the best parts of Julia on her, think of her, he didn't know what she looked like really, so he could picture it in his head for a bit, that kind of thing, and she was flirting right away, day one. So she made it easy for him, which I question, because, if I heard some guy had a sick wife at home, I probably would not want to talk to them that way, personally.
Yeah, I can't imagine many decent people would, to be fair.
Yeah.
Oh, so why are you here? Well, my wife's sick. Hello? It's like,
Yeah.
no. Oh, you're completely right with the whole parasocial relationship thing going on there. Because you're right, he does definitely project all of these positive attributes, even though, as you said, it's clear that I suppose you could say she's almost like a reflection of Henry. Like, they're both heavy drinkers, they're both very isolated, they're both trying to get away from something in real life.
And they both are selfish. When it comes out that the teenage girls are missing, Delilah's first thing is, well, Henry, you were the last one to see them, so should I report it? And it's like she's already putting it like on him when he was on the radio the whole time with her, you know, like pointing out everything. And then no matter what your choice is, she doesn't report it anyway. And then she tries to be like, well, if I reported it now, Henry, you're going to get in trouble. And it's like, no. This is my first year as Henry here. You're the boss of 10 years who didn't report it. I think you're going to be in trouble, Delilah. It just sounds like you're just putting it on Henry. So she was doing like the same thing that Henry was doing with his wife, just putting all his problems is because of on this person instead of owning anything. And I feel like that's what you need to be a fire watcher. Maybe that's like a personality trait.
I mean, she is definite, and don't get me wrong, I think that there's a lot of Firewatch personality traits, I suppose is the right word. You know, I think feel as if there's a checklist. It's like, you have to be a heavy drinker, you have to be someone who is emotionally volatile, you have to have a dark and brooding past, which... You know, when we talk about the antagonists of this game, you can see he also shares those traits with Delilah and Henry. So it's weird because you do want to sympathise with Henry at times, but there's just other times where you sit there and you go, Henry, my man, come on, stop donating Twitch bits to Delilah here. She's not that into you. What is your deal, man? Yeah, he's just running away, as you said, with his stumpy legs.
Well, part of that is literally, like, I think that's what it is like, it's the human part of it. Humans mess up. Humans make bad choices. Not all the time, but they do. And I feel like maybe that's one reason the game had so much emotional depth was just because you were playing as a not good guy. No matter your choice, you weren't the good guy here.
Yeah, there's no real redemption, as it were. You just try to do the right thing at times, but, you know, it's not like he turns around and says, oh, I was a fool for... Oh, well, he does, like, ruminate over, oh, I was, you know, a fool for leaving Julia or anything, but there's no definitive moment where he goes, hold on, I've been sitting for 90 days up a tower with nothing but a typewriter and a woman who keeps sexting me over this radio. It's like, maybe I should be at home with my wife. Like, there's no moment like that.
I do think the end of the game almost, like, it doesn't give Henry that moment, but it's almost payback. Because, like, we know Delilah's selfish, and her inherent last moment in this game is a selfish move. So after the fire takes over and everything like that, and you're running to Delilah's tower where the helicopter's gonna be, she doesn't even wait for you, dude. You put your effort into her over your wife, and she couldn't even wait for you. Like, I was like, fair. Henry got what he deserved in the end, I guess. Because,
I mean, he even says, oh, maybe you could come to Boulder, Colorado with me and everything. And it's like, Henry, my dude, the helicopter's right there. Like, that's going to be an awkward thing. You know, talking to the pilot, like, so if you got anyone at home, yeah, I've got a wife with dementia, but do you know if Delilah's free? You know, you're like, Jesus, Henry, come on. Calm down. Simmer down, my man. Simmer down. And something that I did notice, and obviously it's supposed to be like a kind of extra, oh, look, that's cool. But earlier on in the game, Delilah asks what you look like, and she draws a picture of you. And, you know, by the end of it, when you get to Delilah's tower, you sit down and you see that picture of yourself, you know, hanging up on the wall. And on the one hand, you can kind of think, oh, that's nice. They had like a personal relationship and everything, or more a professional relationship. But then on the other hand, you can kind of think, she gave so less of a you-know-what about him that she left the picture she drew of him to burn in a wildfire. Henry, my man, don't... This isn't the woman you want to introduce to your folks. I'm just going to say it.
But that's what I'm saying. They're the same. They're both as selfish, and she was just as self-absorbed as he was, and she was probably getting the same kind of thing out of the relationship that he was, but she probably was more realistic in that it wasn't going to leave the tower. Like, that's why she let it burn. It was just part of that scenery. She didn't wouldn't want that in the real world.
Do you think that's why she purposely like broke the lift? Like, the lift to go
yeah.
over? Because, I mean, technically there is a scene where apparently if you go up there, it says something like, oh, you can't use the lift because of, I don't know, some reason to obviously stop you from getting to that point early on in the game. But, you know, like, did she like break it and go, oh no, it's broken?
Yes, probably. I would not be surprised. Like, she says herself that she doesn't really talk to any of the other watchers and everything like that, besides just like work stuff. And I personally, I mean, she's been there 10 years. I wonder if every time there's a new Firewatcher, she just talks to them for that year and then that's it, and then moves on to the next Firewatcher. I don't know. I don't know Delilah's life, but I mean, she was getting pretty nosy with Henry day one. So maybe that's why she doesn't talk to the other Firewatchers. Been there, done that.
I mean, she can't keep getting away with this, like flirting with random Firewatchers. This is like an HR suit waiting to happen here. I feel as if she's probably in the perfect job for that, because if there's a wildfire, she can just go, oh no, wildfire, gotta go, good. And she goes on the helicopter and is like, is she like a mastermind?
Well, and like most Firewatchers probably only do it for like the 1 year. Like I don't know how many career Firewatchers there are. So just she's like, oh, you know, new guy might only be here 1 year. Let me see what his deal is and see if I can drink and talk with him and have fun. like it's all just a game to her. But
I mean, she doesn't even have stairs. They're just made out of whiskey bottles. You just like clink up them. You're like, what the hell?
There is like a half bottle of tequila or something you see in her tower and stuff like that. So
I don't even know if it's right to call her a villain at times.
What a human.
What a human. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, what a human being.
That's the motto of this game. We're all humans.
But speaking of the third human that we have in this game, obviously not including the two teenagers who, honest to God, as soon as they went missing, I was like, oh no! Anyway. Back to the scenery. But yeah, of course, we've got this very serious and quite frankly disturbing undertone in this story. And there were so many moments, as I said, that completely pulled me out. And in a good way, like not in a bad way of, oh my God, it's a scary moment. But it was more moments where, you know, just the unsettling implications. Like there's a scene where you're out at night and you're talking to Delilah and she turns around and she's like, oh, why don't you crack open that bottle of whiskey or whatever? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm out in the forest. She's like, haha, nice try, I can see you in your tower. And he's like, but I'm not in the tower. And I have to admit, that was one of the moments I was just like, hey, wait a minute, I'm not in the tower. Who the hell's in my tower? So I had to like run back. I was like,
I know,
oh,
I hated that scene because then your next like task is run back to the tower. I'm like, why would I do that?
Yeah.
There's someone there. Why would I go back? Like, I'm going to stay out here till they leave. Like, that's what I would have done.
I'm like, do I look like a bodybuilder? With this dad bod of steel. What do you expect me to do, Delilah? What if he has a knife or a gun or something? It's America. Anything could happen.
It's a tower. There is only one set of stairs in and out. So if what if I'm running up and he's running down? What do I do?
But there's the thing as well, though. It's like Delilah's looking, and again, I know obviously it's a far distance, so she probably sees only the silhouette, but I'm assuming Henry doesn't look like, I'm going to spoil who it actually is here, so apologies, but, you know, it doesn't look like Ned. He doesn't look like Ned at all. So again, is that like either she was too drunk or she just didn't care about Henry?
It was dark.
Wait a minute, that's not your chiseled abs and rock hard pecs? It's like, no.
That's actually a really good point because we know Delilah can see Henry well enough that she knows he's wearing cargo shorts. Because she does bring up his cargo shorts multiple times. So it's like she can see the silhouette of his clothes at the very least. So from what the pictures we've seen, Ned and him don't look a whole lot alike. So I'm going to blame it on Delilah's drinking problem.
Yeah, I would say so. She's definitely got beer goggles on for that point. It's like, oh, Henry. Oh, I loved that moment last night where you had a machete running around. It's like, what is wrong with you, Delilah? Yeah, are we sure that Delilah wasn't the main villain here? Again,
I mean, if we want to get into Ned, so, you know, Ned and his son Brian were in the woods and everything like that, and Delilah knew she talked to Brian the most, but she was supposed to report them, and she didn't because she didn't want Ned to get in trouble because she was so fond of his son Brian. And then when we solve the mystery of what happened with Brian, that's kind of Delilah's fault.
Oh, absolutely. And then you have to like sit through and be like, oh no, it wasn't your and then you look at the script. It wasn't your fault. Fault? Is that French for it is your fault? You know, like the one thing I will say before we talk about like Ned and Brian's kind of storyline, the one thing I didn't like, I will say, and I don't know how you feel about this, is see when there was the whole conspiracy theory part where, and don't get me wrong, I like how it plays into the story where basically Henry finds the transcripts between himself and Delilah and, you know, how they had like steamy walkie-talkie, rumpy-pumpy and all that. You know, it's the nicest way I can describe it. I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great. That's the best description I've ever heard of.
But he ends up, you know, finding that and he thinks that he's being tracked and everything, and it starts to feed into his paranoia, which I think is like a very interesting theme because there's a moment where he starts to break down and he keeps saying to Delilah, like, what if none of this is real? I've got the same illness as Julia and everything. And that is such a heartbreaking moment because although, you know, Henry has done some terrible stuff, it is horrible for, you know, to think that, oh God, what if I am losing my mind? And obviously Delilah talks him down. It's a very human moment there.
It's just a good contrast to even like the beginning because it's like it's showing him almost having like a little bit of empathy for what his wife is going through.
But then again, it is a bit awkward when you look at yourself and you're like, you're the one controlling Henry. And you're like, it's like, what if it's all in my head? What if it's a simulation? I'm like, yeah, that would suck. Totally not a simulation, Henry. You're good, man. You're good.
I did like the transcripts and stuff. There was so much again in the story that you could choose not to look at, but you also could, and you could get like more of a background of Delilah and stuff like that, and more of like her story. And I thought that was like a cool touch. That I mean, her story is pretty boring. She had like an ex, and I think she's older than Henry slightly, but she's been doing this for 10 years. But it was just like a nice backstory to like everything else that's going on, and it kind of shows how crazy Ned was after everything happened.
You get to see, again, that kind of downward spiral of Ned's psyche after he loses Brian, and clearly he is, for good reason, like he is a veteran of the US Army and everything, so he's got that ingrained to him that he's really aggressive with his son, you know, he wants his son to be like a stereotypical, oh, you're a man, you have to climb these cliff faces and everything, and you have to do this and that, whereas Brian, he's a bit more sensitive, he likes, as you see later on, he loves D&D, even though it's not called Dungeons and Dragons, it's called, I don't know, like some knockoff, like Dice and Dungeons or something, I don't know. Dice and Delilahs, let's say. You know,
probably.
He loves that fantasy side of life, and of course his father doesn't approve, and that's why he runs to Delilah, which, let's face it, probably not the best choice, but hindsight's, you know, a wonderful thing. The one thing I didn't like though, and again it is debunked, and it is probably the moment of the game where I got the most bugs when I was playing it, so maybe that factors into this, but it's like when you go to the camp and everything and you see all the equipment for surveillance and everything, and it's like, oh my god, it's a government conspiracy, or oh, it's like a shady organisation. The biggest sigh that I could muster at that point, I was just like, don't tell me it's going to be a secret organisation that, you know, oh, they're looking after Firewatch people. It's like, why? What is the US government doing spying on Rangers? And obviously we find out later that it isn't. It's Ned trying to frame this narrative, and I like it in a way because it does show that although there is a lot in this game, that it does feed into their paranoia, it feeds into that idea of them self-reflecting to say, oh, why is this happening? Maybe because of X, Y, and Z. But I would have been so mad, I'm not going to lie. I would have been so mad if it was like a government conspiracy. Usually people are like, oh, it is a government conspiracy, but this is only one of the only times I'm like, can we not have X-Files in here? Can we not have the CIA here for whatever reason? Or like the weird League of Firemen coming in?
The first time I played it and I saw that part, I actually thought like if it was something government related or someone was spying, I didn't think they were spying on me. I thought they were spying on Delilah. I thought maybe it was Delilah was doing something else, and Delilah, because she just rubbed me the wrong way sometimes with her not wanting to report things, because she does that multiple times. So like I was like, okay, maybe someone's spying on her and I'm just caught in the middle kind of thing was my first thought. But I'm glad they did not go that route, because I feel like that would have totally just ruined any emotional context that was going on there.
Oh yeah, so-and-so's dead, but you know what? The CIA were right.
It's aliens. It was aliens this whole time.
It was the mysterious figure who was an alien. It's like, no.
It was Sasquatch. You know, Bigfoot was starting fires. He got a pack of matches. We got to get them back.
Yeah, he's in cahoots with Delilah. Delilah gives him matches and he gets her Sasquatch whiskey.
And Delilah didn't report it. So
do you think that's the real thing? She just flew away with the Sasquatch at the end. There never was a Delilah. It's like, what the hell have I been talking to?
Well, I don't know. I guess they have to make a Firewatch 2.
Yeah,
we
Firewatch
need to know
DLC.
what happens. Yeah.
What, Sasquatch Watch?
That would be such a good game.
That would be, but it'd be terrifying. You're turning around the corner and just this huge Sasquatch. Hey, what's up? Do you want some matches?
But it has to have some like emotional story where like your wife got some disease that made her really furry or something. So you leave her to come to the woods, and then all of a sudden you run into Sasquatch, and now it's like reflecting on what you just ran away from.
It's okay to be furry. It's like, what? What is this game? 10 out of 10 game of the year edition.
Oh my goodness, I gotta learn how to program. Get on this.
Going back to the quote-unquote antagonist of this game, and again, it's hard to call him an antagonist. I mean, don't get me wrong, he does try to kill Henry at some point, so that's pretty antagonistic behaviour, don't get me wrong, but it is quite hard to see this dad who obviously, he wants his son to be much like him. He wants him to be this like macho figure and everything, and Brian just wants to be himself. He wants to be this fantasy nerd, for lack of a better term. And keep in mind that this game takes place in, I think it's 1989. The fact is that obviously being into fantasy novels and things like that, it wasn't, I mean, obviously it was a thing, but it was more associated with being a nerd and being very introverted. Don't get me wrong, technically those still apply nowadays, but it's not as much of a social stigma. You know, he also carried around like the disposable camera, which you bring along and everything, which I have to say I had a bit of an awkward moment. Did you use the camera?
The first time I didn't really use the camera. I think I kept forgetting, and then by the time I got to the end I was like, oh yeah. But the second time I purposefully did, because there's an achievement if you use all the film. So the second time I did use all the camera, yeah.
The only time I used it was to, and I have to admit this will sound morbid, but I took a picture of Brian's body because I was like, right, okay, we'll need evidence, right?
That's what I did too, though.
Because I was like, we need evidence in case someone says, oh, Henry, you killed Brian. I'm like, no, you look at this film. But what I didn't realise was, see at the very end when the credits roll, it also includes your footage. So the only picture that I'd taken was a picture of Brian's body, and I was like, oh my. Oh no, very morbid indeed. I was like, I should have taken more pictures of like the scenery or anything.
So beautiful of a game. You're like, I'm just walking by.
You know, it's scenery, nah. You know, watchtower, nah. Delilah, nah. Body, ooh, snap. Ooh. Neat. I'm like, oh. But going back to Ned for a second though, it's quite a horrible story. You know, he's a former Firewatch person who, I mean, he tries his best. He tries his best to be that father figure who's there for Brian and everything, but at the same time pushes him to the extent that Brian wants to prove him wrong by going down the cave area, and he ends up falling unfortunately to his death, and the only person that knows he's there is Ned. So of course when he sees you climbing out the cave, as it were, he's like, oh, this is a bit of a problem, a bit of a coinkydink. You know, he tries to stop you by knocking you out, trashing the place, basically just acting like a general bear.
Yeah.
What did you think overall, though, of Ned's role within this game?
Well, I mean, he was creepy from the beginning because you don't know who he is or his motives. And as you get more and more of his story, it gets more and more sympathetic. Yeah, obviously, when he locks you in the cave, super creepy at that point. I do think with Ned, though, like at the end, his ending is he's living in the woods. That's it. Like, there's no idea how long he's going to live in the woods. No one would be able to find him. The woods are huge and expansive. Like, we explore so much. It's such a large map, but we're only like a small section. We talk about other sections of the woods where the other watchers are, but we never like see them. Just with Ned's character, it's another human moment. It's they're all human. They're all making bad decisions with the bad hands they were dealt. And I think Ned would have gotten help if maybe Delilah had reported it. So maybe it's all Delilah's fault.
And on that note, thank you for... No, I'm only joking. No, you're completely right. It's something that seems to keep going back to Delilah.
I know, it's the first time I played this, did not think about it this way. The second time I played it, I was like, why is Delilah always wrong? Why? Like, why is she always just doing the wrong thing? But I mean, she does drink a lot. There's even like a letter you find from one of the other Firewatchers, I think, that's like a complaint or talks about like Delilah's drinking. So probably it was just influenced by alcohol, and she gets it brought to her. She doesn't have to go to the cash boxes like everyone else does. So she's getting, you know, all of her whiskey and tequila hand delivered to her tower. So no wonder she drinks a lot.
Do you think she hears the clinking of the parcel, you know, and she runs immediately to like the window of the watchtower? You know, like, oh boy, it's Tequila Tuesday.
I'm assuming that they would have to helicopter it to her, right? So
Oh
maybe
my
she's
God,
just
yeah.
looking out and she just like, and she's like, oh, sweet. I just ran out. I just finished my last bottle. Perfect timing. And then goes and gets it. She gets like one little thing of bread and then the rest is alcohol.
Oh, great. My heart medication, great.
Yeah, she doesn't eat. It's just drinking all the time.
That's what it seems like, because every time you phone, or rather you radio, or all you hear is just the clinking of the bottle and, oh, Henry, you're like, Delilah, are you okay?
Well, she rarely leaves her tower. She even says, she's like, I just do word searches while you're out running around. It's like, okay, Delilah, so you drink and do word searches and don't report things. What do you do?
How much does she get paid? I don't know, like, how much a firewatcher who's like a professional firewatcher gets paid, but
10 years she's been
too
there.
much. She
Too
gets
long.
paid too much.
Yeah.
She gets paid far too much for whatever she's getting.
That's the moral of the story of this game. Delilah gets paid too much.
Or do you think it's like, kind of going back a bit, but do you think it's the fact there's been budget cuts, you know, and the American government are like, okay, we can't pay you in money, but we've got these bottles of tequila.
Oh my gosh, that would make so much sense though. For her, she's like, you know, I don't mind getting paid this little because I get free room and board for like 3 months. You know, she's like, I don't have to look for a place to live. I don't have to worry about feeding myself. I just get to sit here and do my word searches.
Well, that's until there's an actual fire, and then...
And then she just leaves on a helicopter. What does she do? She just says fire and then leaves. She's like, I watched it. I did my job. I saw it. I watched it. I did report this one, and then leaves on a helicopter.
It's like that meme of walks in, says nothing, goes out without clarifying. It's like, what are you doing, Delilah? I have to admit, this has been a very eye-opening discussion of Delilah. I have to admit, I remember after the game, I obviously looked up the reception of the game to see what other people were saying. And there was a lot of people being like, oh, what's up with Delilah? Delilah conspiracy theories. Is she the villain? Blah, blah, blah. And I never really thought much about it. It's a bit like when I played What Remains of Edith Finch, and my friend was like, oh, you should really play it. And I played it a couple of times. I thought, this is great. And again, it's one of these games that the first time I played Edith Finch, I was like, okay, that was a very emotionally charged game and everything. But then the second time I played through it, I was like, Edith Finch is a monster in that game. And then it's just like this. It's like, Delilah's a monster. You know, it's like, there's no way to spin it. Again, you know, going back to the trademark saying of the night here, they're human. But I feel as if Delilah's a wee bit more human. Let's just say, than the rest of them.
Maybe it's because she's been doing this for so long that she's built this pattern. And so for us, we're just walking in on her doing what she's probably been doing for the past, 7 years. Maybe not the first 3 years she was a Firewatcher, but definitely by year 4, she realized she could get all the alcohol she wanted and didn't have to move because she was the boss. So.
Oh, Delilah.
Hey there, Delilah.
Yeah. You know, I wanted to work the joke in, and I was like, no, don't say it. Like, genuine. It's a bit like, have you ever met someone in your life called Caroline?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You know, immediately the first song that comes in, Caroline, dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun.
And then they look at you as if, wow, I've never heard that joke before, never talking to you again. I feel like...
Yeah.
Maybe that's what drove Delilah to drink. Do you think like all the new Firewatchers were just like, hey there, Delilah, what's it like in your Luke Tower?
Yeah.
Oh.
And so she just started doing shots every time someone said that. She could have done something like productive, like just change her name or give people a nickname to call her by. But instead, she decided it was easier to drink. So that's how she solves all her problems.
Yeah, but that's like one of the things in the game, though. She does turn around and she says something like, I can't remember what she calls Henry, but she calls him something else. And he's like, oh no, it's Henry. And she's like, oh, I like that better. And it's like, what is your deal? Like,
I feel like because we're talking to her through, like, we are not visually seeing her, that we also don't know when she's drunk. So sometimes when we're talking to her, she could easily be drunk and we have no idea unless she like explicitly tells us. So that really makes like the second playthrough, some of the conversations make a lot more sense if you just imagine her drinking.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It deserves a second playthrough for sure to be like, wait a minute, this isn't fair at all. Although I'm laughing, I'm just looking at the plot summary of this game, and this is what the Wikipedia page says, by the way. I just want to point this out.
Okay.
This is about Brian's death, and you know the scene where Ned confesses to everything, and he says Brian's death was accidental, and because of the climbing and experience he fell, and you know, all tragic.
Yeah.
This is the penultimate sentence of the plot summary. Despite Ned's confession, Delilah blames him for Brian's death and leaves on the rescue helicopter. That just summarizes her whole character.
It really does. Maybe she is like Henry if he keeps going in this direction. I like to think maybe after this, Henry goes back to his wife and takes care of his wife for, you know, as long as she's there. You know, like maybe even if it's not in like a romantic capacity, sometimes that happens. But I feel like he still would take care of her because if he doesn't, he's going to turn into Delilah. If he goes back to Firewatching the next summer, he's Delilah and he'll be the next Delilah. Firewatch 2.
They're going to be singing Hey There, Henry.
Firewatch 2 is 10 years later where he's now the manager because Delilah was fired and you're a new person coming in talking to Henry on the walkie-talkie.
Are you implying that Delilah didn't just take that helicopter and escape to like Mexico or something?
She's like, I'm gonna go.
Okay, we found the source of the fire. It's like a sacrifice circle of tequila bottles. Like, why is this in the middle of the forest, Delilah? And she's like, oh, no entiendo.
No idea.
I'm in Mexico. I have no idea. No lo sé.
It was Henry. It was Henry's fault. He was the last one there. It must have been him.
And yeah, of course. And that's why he's like, well done. Well done, Henry. You're fit for the job. Like, I'm sure there's commentary in there, but you know what? Listeners like decide.
We talked about the emotional, we talked about the gameplay, we talked about the beautiful scenes, and then we talked about Delilah's terribleness. Just, you know, she's human, but she's like the most human.
Oh, absolutely.
Most human, yeah, in this game, I think.
You could really slap that on the front of the box. Just, these characters are human. What does that mean? They're human. Just trust us. The only one who's not human is Brian, and that's because he's been, by default, taken out the equation.
Well, he was also a kid, so he didn't have, like, a long enough timeline to really build a character. So, like, you know,
True. And yeah, the teenagers they go missing, and they turn up on a farm and everything. And
yeah, they're fine. They were fine. They were a red herring.
There's one thing I do want to ask you about, and it's the, of course, ending. And it is something we've talked about quite in depth about Delilah's horribleness. I was saying, I'm sorry, I had to return to my home planet. You know, just that bit at the end, Delilah died on her way to her home planet of Firewatch, you know. But, like, what were your thoughts about the ending? Because when I was reading about this, there is a lot of people who hate this ending. A lot of people who are like, oh, it's anticlimactic, it's terrible, you know. Maybe not the worst ending. Like, there are worse endings out there, but what were your thoughts of it the first time you played through?
Yeah, I was going to say there was, like, a difference in the first and the second time. So the first time I played through, I feel like I was hopeful. I felt like maybe Delilah's there, you know? So you're running through the smoke-filled forest and you're trying to get to her as fast before she leaves. And so I thought maybe she would be there. Like maybe there would be a character there that I can like see. So it was almost another loss. Like it started with a loss and it ended with a loss the first time because I didn't realize Delilah was, again, as horrible. You know, I kind of liked the relationship between Henry and Delilah. And so I felt like, you know, it was just another loss to have to experience. The second time I played through and I realized Delilah's human traits, I was like, if she leaves, this relationship is done. And of course she leaves. So I was like, there you go. There you go. She made her choice. And so second time, I was like, Henry deserved this. He deserved it. I didn't hate the ending. I thought it was a good way to wrap it up without leaving too many loose ends. And then you can kind of infer what you got from that game. Because not everyone got the same dialogue. The story is the same, but you don't always have to like let Delilah know everything and stuff like that. So I feel like just how you played that relationship is what you get out of the ending, I guess.
Yeah, there's a really weird playthrough I saw where it was like, oh, I'm doing this challenge run where Henry doesn't talk. And it's basically just you don't answer Delilah. And it's the weirdest thing because Delilah's constantly talking to you and you just don't reply. And I was like, obviously, I think there are moments where the game forces a reply and everything, but everything else, it's like watching the fire, like Flapjack and everything, it's just like silence. It's like playing Ocarina of Time feat Firewatch. You're like, what is this? It's so funny, but it's just so unnerving at times.
Yeah, silence is awkward. I do think this game would have been better if they added more music. There was music during like specific scenes, but a lot of the forest walking, there wasn't really any like a whole lot of ambiance, I don't think, audio-wise. So I think that's one thing this game could have used, in my opinion, is like foresty music ambiance while I'm just like getting lost. Because I got lost a lot the first time.
Same. There were some moments where it was like, oh, go out and try and fix this power line. And I remember looking up and seeing like in the distance all these power lines. I was like, oh... I don't want to walk up. You know, I got lost so many times. One of the ones I hated, and I have to admit, this is like the kind of few criticisms I would have of the game, is there's some moments where it isn't as clear to tell you where you're supposed to go. There's one where you have to find, I think it's like the tracker or some device, and it's buried deep within this random side. I don't even know what you call it, you know, like a side bit. And you're like, oh god, you go in, and then of course you find it. But I was like running around like an idiot because the detector would beep and everything, and then it wouldn't beep, and then it'd beep again. I'm like, I have no idea. Are you expecting me to run through the whole of this map with this pitiful beeping machine? You might as well strap a Tamagotchi to my wrist and say, go forth, Henry, go forth and find this psycho that's stalking you. What am I supposed to do? But of course I looked up the thing, and as much as it is good for the ambience, I don't know, like this might be controversial to say, but there were some moments where I was like, you know, maybe a waypoint wouldn't have been as bad in some bits. And I know the whole point is you're supposed to explore the area.
Yeah.
All I can say is I'm not a good map reader. I'm more a historian than I am like a geographer or a map reader. So I was just getting lost constantly looking at my map going, I have no idea where this is.
You can't really walk and look at the map at the same time. And so that was like my issue because I have the memory of a goldfish. So I would look at the map and be like, okay, I need to go to this and then go right. And then I'd walk and I'd be like, I'm lost. I look at the map. I'm completely not where I'm supposed to be. And I'm like, but I followed the directions in my head that the map said to follow. Where did I get turned around? You know, like where? And so, yeah, so that was, I can't tell if that was just me being bad at games or whether it was just a flaw in the game. But I get it. You are in the woods. It's still within borders, so you're not gonna be lost forever. So
But then again, there was that scene where, as I said, I jumped where you get sucker punched in the back. I was like, oh my god, what's happening? And then that tension was completely destroyed when I was just walking up and down the stream like a jackass. Like, I have no idea where I'm going. I'm like, am I supposed to go this way? No, I'm supposed to go that way. And the only saving grace was when Delilah would come on the radio and be like, oh, you know, how you getting on? And I'm like, okay, I am going the right way then. I must be going the right way because you're talking to me.
It signals
Instead
something.
of day drinking, yeah.
She probably still was day drinking. She probably still was. She just wanted to check in.
Delilah's the kind of person I'd imagine, you know those glasses you get where it's like a straw as well?
Yep.
She's the kind of person I can imagine she's wearing them and she's like talking to me like, oh, you're doing good, Henry. Yeah, just
she's wearing one of those drinking helmets, you know?
Oh god, she would. She absolutely would. Can you imagine if you got to the lookout tower and it's just that waiting for you? Just like, oh, Henry, nice to see you.
She's also like 4 40, I think,
Yeah.
early 40s, and she doesn't go anywhere, and she just plays crosswords. So she's probably out of shape, drinking all the time. So like in my head, this character, I'm just like imagining her, and she probably looks closer to like 60. So I'm just like thinking in my head, I'm like, I want to know what Henry was picturing.
It's like the ultimate catfish.
That's literally what it is. This is like Firewatch catfishing.
Oh yeah, well, I would pay to watch that show. I'm not gonna lie.
Firewatch catfishing, they should make it a special. I don't know if they'll have enough Firewatchers to make it a show.
You're completely right, though. It's like she works in the sun. She barely goes outside, as you said. Maybe she goes outside. We don't know that. But the main thing is, as you said, she day drinks. She does a crossword. She sits there. She's in a very hot environment. And I'm saying before the fire. So for 10 years, she's got like the sun lashing down on her. So skin's going to be all like leathery.
Yeah.
And she'll look like a British tourist in Benidorm. You know, she'll be just completely fried. You know, and of course, I don't know if Henry thought she looked like an anime waifu or something. You know, can you imagine? He's like, oh wow, it's Delilah, the love of my life, and comes to terms with it.
Yeah, because I mean, his wife was probably beautiful, and then she got dementia, and now he's gonna leave her for leathery Delilah. So
the leathery husk of a 10-year veteran of the Firewatch is like, yeah.
Until Delilah gets liver cirrhosis, and then he'll join another long-term career. Maybe he'll go on an oil rig for that game.
Yeah, or like an Arctic research thing. It'd be like, am I making the right choice? Do you know what it reminds me of? I don't know if you frequent Reddit very much, but there's have you ever heard there's like a subreddit called Am I the Asshole?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Don't get me wrong, sometimes they are genuine questions, but you get people who are just so obviously not all there, and they're like,
yeah.
Am I the asshole for saying this absolutely abhorrent thing? But they stole the last chip from my plate or something, and it's like, that doesn't justify what you just said. And that's what I feel like Henry would be. I feel like he would be the guy to go on a subreddit and be like, am I the asshole for leaving my dementia-ridden wife to live in solitude in Wyoming?
Of all the places you could go, you go to Wyoming?
You're the asshole for Wyoming alone, but after that... Also, for legal reasons, that's a joke. I have no idea if Wyoming is nice, but...
It's okay.
I'm assuming it's a lovely place. You know, he definitely, there's just such that disconnect. But again, to semi-justify his actions, he is human. He's not dealing with it. Clearly, he's not dealing with it very well. Is there anything you want to say about the game, just in summary?
Just in summary, I think the game still holds up. And even though I didn't like certain things my second playthrough, I'm still really, there was still so much to discover in playing it again. So it does have good replayability. Again, the graphics are great. The voice acting is phenomenal, and I think that's one reason it makes it so believable too. And so I recommend, if you've listened to this and haven't played it, why? Also play it.
Totally agree with that. If you haven't played it, definitely play it. It's relatively cheap, as far as I remember, on like Steam and usually the Xbox.
It goes on sales.
I mean, if you're buying it on the Switch, that's your fault for... you know, you've got the Nintendo tax. That is on you. That is not on us. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, fair.
Apparently, what I didn't realise was that this game, as I said, this game came out, and this is me reading the Wikipedia page. This game was released in February 2016 for Windows, OS X, Linux. In September 2016, this was released for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Can you guess when the Nintendo Switch port was?
2020.
Close, 2018.
Okay.
So like 2 years later.
I was going to say, it's probably something ridiculous, because they're always late.
Why? I'm not being funny, but this game doesn't seem the most taxing. Like, it's got beautiful scenery for its range and limits and things, but it's not exactly one of the most taxing games, I would say. Like, you're not going to be playing this in ultra graphics or anything. I mean, if there's mods for it, that would be awesome. But and by mods, I mean for the scenery. I don't mean to, like, Photoshop Delilah's leathery husk into the Overwatch tower. Or the tower. Honestly, see if there's a mod for that, please somebody message us, because I would love to see that.
Oh, that would be so good.
Yeah, just like a cardboard cutout. Oh, God. In fact, do you know what it reminds me of? Going back to what I said about Benidorm, there's like a show called Benidorm, and there's a character in that she's a kind of granny figure, and she's got like the very dark skin because she's out in the sun all the time without sunscreen, and she's got the bleach blonde hair. Now I'm just imagining that's just Delilah. I'll send you a picture later to show you. But that's honestly how I imagine her to be, just scooting around being like, oh yeah, I'm the bombshell Delilah. It's like, you're not.
You're like 42 and you look 55. Like, what are you talking about?
How is this possible? The forest looks better and there's just been a wildfire. Going back to the positives. Yeah, I would definitely recommend this game as well. I do think that narratively, it's a fantastic game. You're not going to regret playing Firewatch, I will say. You're not going to regret going into this game and saying, oh, it's a waste of time, because it's not. What I will say is, though, there are some frustrating moments with the gameplay. That's all I'll say. Like, when I got to the camp and you know how you have to look through the files and things?
Yeah.
My game glitched because I was trying to look at different items but kept looping the same dialogue over and over again. I was like, oh, they have been spying on us. And then I looked at the typewriter, oh, they have been spying on us. And then I look up playthroughs of it. It's like, that's not what he's supposed to say. And, I genuinely thought I was stuck at that point. So,
oh, that's annoying.
Yeah.
I think, like, if you play games, then you probably should just play it once. At the very least, it's one of those games I think every gamer should play once. But at the time, I mean, Firewatch was there at one point, and it's just one of those games that I think if you play games, and you, especially if you like story-driven games, definitely for you. And I don't think it would, like, it's not a waste of time. And it's relatively short. It's relative, like, depending on how in depth you want to look into things, you can play through it fairly quickly.
I think in about 3 hours, would you say? Maybe 3 or 4 hours. It's not overly long. I think the longest bit for me, and I have to admit, I think that's what added to the stress, because I had 2 days to play this game because it was going off a Game Pass, and the speed those stubby legs were racing going through Wyoming, being like, okay, I love the story and everything, but I gotta run because I don't have time to waste. If I waste time, I don't finish this game, and it's going off a Game Pass. That's my fault for not playing it sooner. I was like, okay, Henry, go, find Delilah, go. But yeah, don't be like me. Buy the game, because I have to admit, I did buy the game on Steam because I did enjoy it so much.
Yeah.
Like, I did rebuy it. So definitely, if you haven't played this game, absolutely check it out. It is definitely worth your time. And yeah, on that note, Jess, thank you so much for taking part in this episode and discussing not only Firewatch, but the deviancy of Delilah, I suppose.
Yeah. Talked a lot about human psychology and just, how hard it is to be human. So go us. We brainstormed future games like Sasquatch. I think that's what it should be called. Sasquatch.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's better than mine, Sasquatch Watch. No, that's rookie tier.
So yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love talking indie games. So I'm very. This was a great use of my time because I loved it so much.
Well, you're always welcome back. If there's any other game, you're always welcome back to talk about it.
Yeah, if it's an indie game, then yeah, definitely invite me back.
But before we wrap up this episode, where can the lovely listeners at home find your content?
All my content. Okay, so I am one of 3 members of a podcast called Opinionated Lushes. We are 18 plus, so don't look for us unless you're 18 plus. But you can find our podcast, Opinionated Lushes, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to check out our merch store and other things we do, search up our Linktree /Opinionated Lushes, and you can find all of our links there. I personally do music as well. I've had music on HBO shows, MTV, that kind of stuff. So you can find me, Jessica Hart, HART, wherever you get your music. And again, I have a Linktree /Jessica Hart Music if you want to keep up to where I'm playing shows and everything else with that. And I also stream video games on Twitch. So go to twitch.tv/VarietyJess. That is me. And currently playing scary games because I can only play scary games if I have an audience watching me because I can't do it by myself. So yeah, those are all the places you can find me. And yeah. That's it.
No, thank you for that. And if you want to find more Chatsunami content, or of course this episode, in which case you probably are listening to this episode on there. So, you know what? I'm just going to remind you, just in case you forgot, in case you went away to play Firewatch and you're like, where can we find other episodes? So you can find Chatsunami on podpage.com/Chatsunami. And of course, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and all good podcast apps. Just look for the Red Panda, and we'll see you there. But until then, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. Stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, stay hydrated. But preferably without Delilah's tequila. I just wanted to point that out for legal reasons. Without that, but yeah.